What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be reacting to my league table prediction video that we did back in September of last year when I last predicted the Championship League table in its entirety from top to bottom. We of course waited until the start of September, until the transfer window was over and done with, so we knew exactly what the squads looked like for each of the sides, and we predicted the 24 teams and where I thought they'd finish. And you'll be able to see my league table prediction here or here. It's one side of me, I'm not sure which. You'll be able to see my predicted league table, and we're going to run through each of the sides from bottom to top, where they finished and how far I was off predicting their eventual league finishes.
He's in and he's snuck it across to Hayden Hudney.
So starting off at the very bottom, Rotherham United of course finished at the bottom of the Championship table, one place lower than I predicted. I had them finishing 23rd, and to be fair, I think it would have surprised anyone and everyone if Rotherham stayed up this season. I think arguably their achievement last season, or the season before I guess, was monumental in itself, the fact they maintained their Championship status for another season, but I think a lot of people found and predicted that it would be very, very tough for them to do that once again this season, and they almost were shockingly bad. You know, I thought they'd struggle, but I didn't think they'd be as bad as they were, and in the end, with a few results towards the end of the season, after their actual official relegation, they picked up some points which steered them away from being maybe in the conversation as one of the worst Championship sides we've ever seen, because it very much looked like that 5 or 6 weeks ago. But Rotherham United, as expected, relegated from the Championship, one position lower than I predicted. The same could be said for Huddersfield, who finished 23rd, and again, they were one place lower than where I predicted them to be. Again, another side who, the writing you could say, has been on the wall, that they'd finally fall through the trapdoor into League One. Of course, they've struggled in recent seasons, and this season hasn't helped whatsoever. It's been incredibly inconsistent for Huddersfield. They've had multiple different managers, multiple different styles. Brighton Wright has not come in and improved them in any way, shape or form, and I think it's even more disappointing that they've gone down with a game to go. I thought Huddersfield would at least take it until the final day, but they were all but relegated on the penultimate day of the season the week before, and it's a pretty bruising one for them, but not one that I don't think we all saw coming in a strange way. So I had them relegated, albeit not in 23rd. They still went down, so I predicted 2 of the 3 relegated sides correctly. But I don't think many people predicted the 3rd relegated side, because Birmingham City have been relegated, and I had them in 12th. 10 places lower than where I predicted. Now, I'd be shocked if anyone got this one bang on, but Birmingham City's relegation is one of, I think, the most shocking cases of self-sabotage in Championship history, and I will be making a separate video on this alone because there's so much to unpack. But following that transfer window in the summer, I think a lot of us were pretty in agreement that Birmingham had, if not the best, one of the best transfer windows we'd seen in the Championship in the summer heading into this season. And part of me back in September was thinking that I'd actually maybe not predicted them to finish high enough in 12th. I was really unsure on how Birmingham would do and how their new signings would gel, and I thought 12th was the safest place, because if you're unsure, just go down the middle. So for them to get relegated is an outstanding case of self-sabotage, and as I say, we could unpack it, you could go into so much detail on what has happened, but they were 6th when they sacked John Eustace, so they could have been mid-table, and my prediction might have been accurate, but the Wayne Rooney appointment was absolutely disastrous, and in the end, Gary Rowett couldn't keep them up, of course. They were a tad unfortunate with Tony Mowbray falling ill, and I still wish the Boro legend all the best. Maybe if he'd been fit and firing, they might have stayed up. I think there's a strong chance they probably would have done. So there is a case of maybe bad fortune to Birmingham's relegation, but it's safe to say from the position they were in October, to be relegated is unforgivable, and they have finished 10 places lower than where I expected. And a lot of Brummy fans think it'll be a given that they'll come back up. It's not a given that you're going to get back from League One. Just ask Sheffield Wednesday, Derby County, Portsmouth, among many other big clubs who have fallen into the third tier. So, yeah, Birmingham, relegated, 10 places down from where I thought they'd be. Just surviving above the dotted line was Plymouth, who I had in 13th. And they finished 8 places lower, so another stinker for me. But in fairness, I think Plymouth were well on track to finishing in and around where I thought they'd be. Maybe not quite as high as 13th, maybe 15th, 16th, 17th, but the appointment of Ian Foster following Stephen Schumacher's departure for Stoke City certainly crippled Plymouth, and thankfully, because I have a soft spot for them, I'm glad they didn't fall through the trap door. It would have been really, really unfortunate for them because surviving in that first season is so important, and they've just about managed to do that, so fingers crossed they can get the next appointment right if they make one, and they can steer clear of the drop next season. So my prediction might have been closer with Plymouth. A bad appointment pretty much ruined it, but thankfully for them, they managed to stay up. Next up, I had Sheffield Wednesday, who finished 4 places higher because I thought they'd be bottom. And can you blame me? After, was it 6, 7 or 8 games, they looked already dead and buried, and Danny Rule, then the job he's done, is unbelievable. It is up there with one of the best jobs this season. Top 3, I think, for managers, and as well as grading every championship team season, I'm probably going to rank the managers as well in a lot of the content we've got planned, so subscribe for that if you haven't already. But I think Danny Rose had to have Sheffield Wednesday. I think since he come in, they're around 8th in the championship, which is bonkers when you compare how bad they were. So he deserves so much credit, as does the squad, that they've been able to stay up. And like Plymouth, they're a club I think bring a lot to the championship, a great fan base, and a way that I want to go to next season. So I'm delighted Sheff Wednesday have stayed up and that we're going to have the Steel City derby next season, but I don't think anyone gave them any chance. So the fact they've stayed up and they're 4 positions higher than where I predicted, I don't think I've been much happier to get a prediction wrong. I'm delighted to see Sheffield Wednesday stay in the championship. Next up, we have Blackburn Rovers, who in fairness, I was almost right. I had them finishing 18th, they finished 19th. I had an inkling, I just had a gut feeling after the summer that Blackburn would struggle this season. And I don't know what that was, I can't quite recall what my reasoning was, but it's almost come to fruition. They could have gone down on the final day had they lost to Leicester, but they pulled a win out, and I think that was helped by Sammy Smodic. I don't think anyone would have predicted his form this season. Golden Boot winner, should have won Championship Player of the Season. I think he has kept them up, if I'm honest. But yeah, I thought Blackburn would struggle, and they did just that. They've had their change of managers as well. Be interesting to see how John Eustace does next season. But for their sake, they'll be hoping they don't have as much of a flirtation with relegation next season. Next up, we have QPR. They finished 18th. I predicted them to finish 20th. I did think, like what was the case, they would be embroiled in a relegation battle, but I think Marty Cifuentes deserves a little bit of credit for keeping them as far clear as they have been, because at times this season it very much looked likely that QPR would be dropping into League One, but Cifuentes has done a brilliant job and he has just kept them clear. Again, I can't remember my exact reason as to why I thought QPR would just about stay up. It might have been that I just thought there would be 3 worse teams than them this season, but you look at their squad, they do have some very quality players, and I think it just took the right manager, aka not Gareth Ainsworth, to get the best out of some of these players, and that I think is what's kept them above the dotted line, and they've kept clear of it, and I'm glad, because again, they're a good club and a club that I like to see in the Championship. So I wasn't too far off with this one either. QPR just staying clear as I predicted. Same could be said for Stoke City. I refused at the start of the season to get too excited by their transfer business. It's the same every season for Stoke. You look at the squad, you look at the transfers, and you go, this is it. This is the season. They click, they push for the playoffs, but I just thought, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to fall for it. And I'm glad I didn't, because I was close on this one as well. Stoke finished 2 places above where I thought they'd be. Similar story to QPR. I thought they might get sucked in, but as Stoke always do, they have enough quality to get themselves clear, and that's exactly what they did. Had a change of manager, which I didn't expect. Stephen Schumacher had a few wobbly moments, but he has kept them clear, and they finished in that typical Stoke position of around 16th, 17th, 18th. So although I wasn't bang on with this one, I was pretty accurate as well. And again, heading it next season, I don't care what Stoke do. I don't care if they sign Messi, Mbappe, Haaland. I don't care who they sign in the summer. Stoke are still probably going to finish in and around 17th. Now next up, our neighbours, Sunderland. Now, I'm not going to get too much on my high horse here. But I tell you what, Sunderland's season has been a shocker since Tony Mowbray was let go. They have basically, I think, flown the white flag and surrendered this season. I think they're very much looking ahead to appointing a manager for next season, and it's a good job they had as good of a start as they did, Sunderland, because they were only 6 points off the relegation zone. They were level on points with Stoke and QPR when the curtain closed on the championship season, and they finished 9 points lower than I thought they would. I thought they'd be contesting with Boro, Coventry for the playoffs like last season. I think it's a very disappointing season for Sunderland, this one, and it could be the last they see of some of their best players, like Jack Clarke, for example. So Sunderland's window of opportunity of getting through the playoffs might have come and gone. Who knows what the future brings for them, but it's safe to say, yeah, the season has been an absolute disaster for them. And I look back to earlier in the season when they were saying to Boro fans, mind the gap, and we beat them 4-0 at the Stadium of Light. All I'm going to say, Mackems, is look at the gap now. It's quite big, isn't it? The first one I got bang on was Watford. Now, there's not much you can really say about the mid-table sides, but I just didn't really fancy Watford. I just thought they wouldn't flirt with the playoffs. They wouldn't be in too much trouble. I predicted 15th. Nailed it. That's our first one that we've nailed in this video. Not much else to say about Watford. It seemed like a season of transition for them. Who knows what the future will bring for them under Tom Cleverley, but they're a team who should be knocking on the door of the playoffs, looking up rather than down. And I predicted them to have a very mediocre season, and that's what has been the case. So we'll see what happens with them next season. Same could be said for Swansea. I wasn't too far off with them either. They finished 14, 3 positions higher than I thought. They were another side who I thought wouldn't be in too much danger of going down, but again, wouldn't be high enough to be fighting for the playoffs. So not much else to be said here. Of course, the original appointment earlier in the season, I can't remember the name of the guy who was in charge now, Michael Duff, that was the one. That went pretty badly, and luckily for them, they've recovered well enough to stay clear of any real danger. But they were another side who I thought would be in that sort of 13th to 17th bracket. They wouldn't really do much this season. It would just be a season of just staying clear of danger and building on it for next season. So although I wasn't too far off, Swansea had the sort of season I was expecting. Millwall, not so much. They finished 13th, 3 places lower than I predicted. I thought they would be in an outside chance of maybe fighting for the playoffs, but I thought the quality above them, in between them and the playoffs, was just too strong. I had Norwich, Preston, Sunderland, Boro, Coventry sort of above them. They finished strongly, and I think my prediction would have looked a hell of a lot worse. Had Neil Harris come in and done the job that he's done, because they've picked up really good form towards the end of the season and have steered clear of what at times looked like a potential relegation battle for them. So, yeah, he's saved my blushes and made my prediction look a little bit better, but in context, I had Millwall nowhere near the drop. I had them sort of where they were the season before, but just falling short. So they've done well to recover a mid-table position, but their season hasn't been anywhere near as good as I thought it would be. Cardiff finished 12th. They finished a lot higher than what I thought. I had them finishing all the way down in 21st, so I've missed the boat on this one quite massively. They finished 9 places higher than I thought they would. I just had a really bad feeling with their squad that Cardiff wouldn't be anywhere near mid-table and would be fighting for their lives down the bottom. So credit to them that they've steered clear of that. In fact, they were looking a little bit better. They weren't far off the playoffs a few weeks ago. They've fallen away a little bit, and I think they are where they should be, in that sort of mid-table group of sides who are too good to go down but not good enough for the playoffs. And that might be where Cardiff are for a few seasons until they start building. But I was naive to think that they might be in a relegation dogfight, and I certainly got that one a little bit wrong. But I think the 12th place is probably in and around where they should be, I think, over next season and maybe the one after too. Next up, we had Bristol City. They finished 11th. 5 places clear of where I thought they would be. Not much else to say here. Bristol City probably have finished higher than I thought they would, but they're just a very mid-table side, a bit like Preston. They just exist in the Championship every season and aren't going to go up, aren't going to go down. And although I was quite a few positions off, and maybe they're at the other end of the mid-table mediocre group than I expected, it's sort of the sort of season I expected for Bristol City, and like Cardiff, I think that's where they'll be over the next few seasons. In 10th, we have Preston North End, who finished 2 places lower than where I thought they would be, so not far off this one either. Again, they're a side who I thought would be in the conversation, but from the outside looking in for the playoffs, and that's sort of where they finished in the end, they've dropped off towards the end of this season. I think it's safe to say they've been overperforming. And for a side who finished where they did, their manager is not popular at all. The fans really don't like Ryan Lowe and don't like his football. So I think they may be guilty of overperforming quite a bit compared to where they've finished. So arguably, they're not far off of where they should be, maybe a little bit higher than where I predicted them to be, or where I thought they would be. I thought they'd be 8th. They've dropped off a little bit, which is probably in and around where they should be. So not too far off with this one as well. I don't think they'll replicate this position next season. I think maybe Preston might drop down a little bit lower, unless they change their manager. In 9th, Coventry City. Now, they're 4 places lower. I did have Coventry in the playoffs, and I think they'll be a little bit disappointed. And I think, like Boro, they are guilty of their bad start. A bad start and a bad finish, because like us, Coventry didn't start very well, and they've not finished well either. I had them guaranteed to be in the playoffs, and maybe up until a couple of games ago, it still looked like it was nailed on. But that FA Cup semi-final has really knocked them for 6, and I think their season sort of finished there, and it's petered out quite badly. So I don't think I was far off, but there's sort of 2 spells within the season where I think Coventry have let themselves down, because at times this season they've looked like a playoff side undoubtedly. So it could be a case, a bit like Boro, that next season they'll look ahead to the playoffs once again. Maybe, like Boro, there was a missed opportunity at the start and a poor finish. But I think, like Boro, and both sides are in very similar positions, they've got strong foundations heading into next season to kick on and maybe make the playoffs, but I think they'll be disappointed that they've not got there, and 9th might be a bit of an underwhelming finish for them. And exactly like that, I've gone with Boro the same. They finished 8th. I had Boro sneaking in to the playoffs in 6th, exactly like Coventry City. Should have been there. I think had we had a good start, we had an even worse start. We were bottom of the league, I think, after 7 games, and despite an unbelievable finish, losing only 1 in 12, we have dropped points against the lower league sides at home, which have been criminal. Dropping 4 points to Rotherham. We failed to beat Huddersfield at home, Plymouth at home, Sheffield Wednesday, I think. No, we beat them at home. I think it might have been QPR. We failed to beat Stoke as well. So, again, like Coventry, Boro should have been there in the conversation, but some really poor results and a poor start to the season has let us down. But like Coventry, we've got the foundations to certainly kick on, and I think we should both be looking ahead to finishing where I predicted us to finish next season, which is 5th or 6th, or maybe even higher. And then just outside the playoffs, Hull City finished 7th, 4 places higher than where I thought they would be. I had them in 11th, and I guess they're not a million miles away. I think given the January business Hull have had, it is an underwhelming end to the season. I don't think anyone foreseen them making the signings that they did in January. Fabio Carvalho being one. Was it Zarori from Burnley? A few others as well. Ryan Giles. So that maybe made a lot of people's pre-season predictions look a little bit lower given how Hull recruited in January. But to still finish short of the playoffs and miss out on that opportunity is a big miss for them, and I feel like they're going to be in a similar position to Boro now. They're going to lose all their loan players, have to replace them all, a little bit of an overhaul. I think they're a year behind where Boro were, or where Boro are, and it'll be interesting to see how Hull react to that from a financial and recruitment point of view. I think they've really missed a trick not going up this season, or not getting into the playoffs at the very least. So although they've finished 4 places higher than I predicted, I still think they'll be a little bit disappointed. Into the playoffs. Now there's one side who have overperformed from where I predicted it, won massively, and the first one's Norwich, who finished 6th. 3 places higher than where I figured they would be, so not a million miles away once again, but I think David Wagner deserves real credit, because at times this season Norwich have looked rocky. They've looked wobbly, looked like the wheels had fallen off, and the club could have easily panicked and sacked Wagner maybe once or twice this season, but they stuck to their guns, they kept him in, and he delivered, and they've held their nerve, and that's fair play to the hierarchy at Norwich. And albeit they've not gone into the playoffs with that much momentum, and I will be previewing the playoffs later this week, I think getting them there is credit to him, because as I say, at times this season it didn't look like they'd get there, and I think they've certainly capitalised on some of the teams between now and the playoffs who I predicted to get there, like Boro, Sunderland and Coventry, having really underwhelming seasons. So credit to Norwich, getting them into the playoffs. Will they get through? Time will tell, but yeah, they've certainly exceeded my expectations, and delivered a playoff campaign I didn't expect. One playoff campaign I didn't expect was West Brom. They have proved me wrong massively. I had them 14th, and Carlos Corberán has waved his magic wand and he's got them up to 5th, which is outstanding. It really, really is. I think given the lack of funds and the lack of flexibility in the transfer market that they've had and the squad that he's had to deal with this season, the off-the-pitch issues, Carlos Corberán has proven why he's one of the best managers in the Championship. And I mentioned this with Danny Röhl. I think Danny Röhl, Corberán, and probably Kieran McKenna are the 3 managers of the season for me, just because of what they've achieved, given what they've had and what they've had going against them this season. So for West Brom to finish in the playoffs is quite the outstanding effort, and he's a manager I would certainly love in my corner going into a playoff campaign. So fair play to him and fair play to West Brom. They've over-exceeded my expectations by a country mile, and I think they've got themselves a shot in the playoffs. We're going to put 4th and 3rd together because I think the top 4 were pretty nailed on. Certainly Leeds and Southampton, and I think a lot of people would have probably had one of these 2 in the top 2 along with Leicester, but I didn't, and I'm going to gloat very, very shortly about the teams I had in the top 2, but I did have Southampton and Leeds in 3rd and 4th, just the other way around. You know, I had them the opposite. I had Leeds to finish in 4th, with Southampton finishing in 3rd. As it happens, they've been swapped around, and yeah, in that case, Leeds and Southampton have pretty much done as I expected them. I think the one caveat is Leeds had a massive opportunity to get themselves promoted automatically, and they very, very much bottled it. So yeah, I think they'll be disappointed that they should have maybe had 2nd, or maybe even a massive chance to win the title, you could argue, with Leeds United, and they've massively, massively let that one slip, and will be going into the playoffs with no form, no confidence, and with a real uphill task now. So yeah, Leeds will be disappointed that they've managed to miss out, and I don't think the playoffs will be as straightforward for them, whereas Southampton are pretty much as and where I expected them to be, and they're going in off of a win against Leeds. So if they do come up against each other in the playoff final, that could be a real psychological advantage for them. And obviously, I'll talk about the playoffs more in a separate video, but Southampton and Leeds, as and where I expected them to be, just the other way around. And now I'm going to gloat, because I predicted the top 2, and this was in September. I predicted Ipswich 2nd, Leicester 1st, and I am more than delighted that I've predicted that to be the case. Ipswich have done it. They've gotten promoted up against 3 of the toughest, most expensive, powerful, wealthy sides we've ever seen drop down into the Championship. Ipswich, against all odds, have beaten Southampton and Leeds to automatic promotion. They're only 1 point off of the title. Again, another video I'm going to do individually, because it deserves to be talked about in its own video, is what Kieran McKenna's done at Ipswich. It is out of this world what he has achieved, but I did predict at the start of the season that they'd do it. I had a hunch, I had a gut feeling that the momentum would carry through and Ipswich would get the better of it, and they would secure automatic promotion and make it back-to-back, get to the Premier League, and they have. So I'm a little bit cocky, I'm not going to lie, that I got this one right. And of course, that is followed by Leicester City finishing 1st, which, don't get me wrong, this should have always been the outcome, given the resource, given the squad. I think everyone said at the start, if Leicester don't win the title here, even finishing 2nd, it's the same result, but just the achievement of winning the title, they should be doing it this season, and they made it as hard as possible for themselves, and they tried their hardest. Enzo Maresca tried his hardest to not get Leicester promoted and not have them win the title. They had the biggest wobble of all wobbles, bottling a 14-point lead at one stage, but they did enough in the end when it mattered the most. When crunch time, when the pressure ramped up, they got themselves through and won the title, which they should have done. Should they have done it more comfortably? Absolutely, but as predicted, Leicester got promoted, and they did it alongside Ipswich Town in 2nd. So overall, guys, I'm pretty happy with that. You know, let's be honest, I got 3 of the 24 right. I got the top 2 right, and 2 of the bottom 3 right too. So I'm delighted with that prediction. I think I've done well. And there was some others like Blackburn, Preston, Boro. only a few out. And I think getting my own club pretty close is I'm quite happy with that as well, because it's easy to predict your own club and to maybe get a little bit too excited. And don't get me wrong, my initial prediction in the summer was Boro to go up in second. I'm not going to forget about that. But having seen our transfer window, I very much mellowed my predictions and I wasn't far away. And of course, I think Southampton, Leeds, they were tap-ins, really. And you could say Leicester was a tap-in as well. But I'm quite happy with my predictions. The only stinkers I will admit to having was Birmingham. But I don't think anyone had them going down. And I think Sunderland's fall off a cliff as well was one I didn't see coming. I'll apologise to Cardiff fans in advance. I didn't expect you guys to do as well as you did this season, and Corberan deserves immense credit for what he's done at West Brom. But that's my league table predictions and the outcomes, and I'm pretty happy in the end with how I did over the whole. So let me know your thoughts on maybe what the championship table finished in comparison to your predictions this season. I'll be very intrigued to see your thoughts and if it is the sort of league table you ended up predicting in the end. But I'm very, very happy with that. And as I've mentioned a few times in this video, I will be back to do more individual videos. We're going to be previewing the playoffs. We're going to be discussing Ipswich's achievements, Birmingham's shock relegation, among others, in more detail. So subscribe to this channel for much more if you're new and if all of that interests you. But until next time, guys, leave me a like on the video, leave me a comment in the section below with your thoughts as always. And until the next one, a big thank you for watching, and I'll see you all next time.